You know that ficus in the corner of your room? Turns out it's way more than just decoration. Today, we're going to dive into some incredible science that shows plants are active, aware beings. They're constantly sensing and responding to the world in ways that will totally change how you see them.
All right, so let's just jump right in with a pretty wild question. Is your houseplant secretly watching you? I know, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but the real answer is so much more complex and, honestly, more fascinating than you might think. We're about to unpack how plants perceive their world, and let me tell you, it's a world filled with light, shadow, competition, and maybe, just maybe, a form of vision.
You know, for centuries, we pretty much saw plants the way Aristotle did, as these passive things with a vegetative soul, just kind of growing and feeding. But modern science has completely flipped that old script. We now know that plants are incredibly sensitive organisms. They're active, they're perceptive, and they're constantly processing really complex information to make calculated responses.
Okay, so how in the world do they do it? Well, the key to understanding almost everything a plant does is to understand how it perceives its single most important resource, light. And this isn't just about fuel for photosynthesis. For a plant, light is a constant stream of absolutely vital information.
Plants read all this light-based information using things called photoreceptors, and you can honestly think of these proteins as millions of tiny, specialized eyes scattered all over the plant. Now, they don't see images like we do, but they detect every little nuance of the light, how bright it is, its color, its direction, and even how long it lasts. This is really the foundation of their awareness.
And get this, it's not a one-size-fits-all system. Oh no, plants have a whole toolkit of these photoreceptors. You've got phytochromes, which are the absolute masters of detecting shade from other plants. Then there are cryptochromes, which help set the plant's internal 24-hour clock. Phototropins, they're the ones responsible for that classic lean towards a window. And UVR8 acts like a built-in sensor for harmful UV rays, telling the plant when it's time to make its own sunscreen.
Let's just zoom in on those phytochromes for a second, because they are super cool. They basically work like a reversible molecular light switch. In direct sunlight, there's tons of red light, and that flips the phytochrome to its on position. This active on version then travels into the cell's nucleus and starts switching genes on or off to control growth. But in the shade, where there's more far red light, the switch gets flipped back to off. It's just a remarkably elegant system.
So, okay, plants have these crazy sophisticated sensors, but so what? What do they do with all this information? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about passively reacting. We're talking about plants taking decisive, sometimes super dramatic action to survive and thrive.
And that brings us to a silent, invisible war that's probably happening in your garden right now. Seriously. Using those little phytochrome switches we just talked about, plants can literally see the specific quality of a shadow cast by another plant. They know, with molecular certainty, when a competitor is trying to muscle in on their sunlight.
So how does that work? Let me break it down. Direct sunlight has a high ratio of red to far red light. But when that light has to filter through a competitor's leaves, the red light gets soaked up for its own photosynthesis, but the far red light passes right through. The plant below detects this sudden drop in the red to far red ratio, and it's like a blaring alarm bell going off that says, "Warning, I'm being shaded."
And that alarm bell triggers something called the shade avoidance syndrome. The plant basically goes into emergency mode. It's like, forget strong roots, forget wide leaves. We're putting everything into growing tall, and we're doing it now. All just to get its leaves back up into the sun above the competition. It's a high-stakes race for survival, happening all the time.
So that shade avoidance thing, that's a calculated move playing out over days. But a plant's ability to act isn't always that slow, not even close. I mean, have you ever seen the Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant? It reacts to touch in less than a second. We're not talking about growth here. This is real-time movement, faster than you can even blink.
It's just this incredible piece of biological engineering. A light touch kicks off an electrical signal and action potential, just like in our own nerve cells. This signal zips down to a special motor organ called a pulvinus, and that causes this massive sudden flood of ions to pour out of its cells. Water immediately rushes out to follow them, causing the cells to deflate like tiny water balloons, and the whole leaf just collapses. It's a purely hydraulic movement, all powered by an electrical signal. So cool.
Okay, but if you think electrical signals and hydraulic movements are wild, you might want to buckle up, because now we're getting into one of the biggest, most controversial mysteries in all of botany, the case of the Bocchilla trifoliola, a vine from Chile that some people have nicknamed the chameleon vine. What this plant does is so bizarre, it forces us to ask a question that sounds like it's straight out of fiction. can a plant actually see? I'm serious. This one vine can climb up a bunch of different trees, and as it goes, it changes its leaves to perfectly mimic the shape, size, and color of whichever host it happens to be on at that moment. How on earth is that possible?
Well, scientists have three main theories. Maybe it's sniffing out airborne chemical signals from the host plant. Or, another idea, maybe tiny microbes are transferring genes from the host to the vine. But then there's the most radical theory, one that was first proposed over a century ago, that the plant is actually looking at its host, using tiny lens-like cells on its leaves as rudimentary eyes.
So to test this vision idea, researchers did this totally wild experiment. They had the vine climb a fake plastic plant. No chemicals, no genes, just plastic. And you're not going to believe it. The vine still changed its leaves to mimic the plastic ones. And these weren't just, kind of close changes. We're talking measurable shifts in the leaves' actual shape and dimensions.
Okay, now hold on. Before we all decide plants have eyeballs, the scientific community pumped the brakes on this one, and for good reason. Critics pointed out that the experiment might have just created different light or humidity conditions that caused the changes. There were even accusations of selective data analysis, or p-hacking. Plus, the effect was only seen in certain seasons. So the bottom line is, while it's an amazing idea, the whole plant vision thing is still highly controversial and definitely not proven.
So after all this mind-blowing science, what does it actually mean for us? For the plants we live with every single day? How does knowing all this change our relationship with the green things in our world?
Okay, get ready for this. In one study, researchers used machine learning to listen in on the tiny electrical signals of a plant in a room with a person. And the AI, it was able to classify the human's mood with 85% accuracy just from reading the plant's electrical activity. This suggests plants are such unbelievably sensitive environmental monitors that they might even be picking up on cues from us.
So I think the biggest takeaway here is this. Your houseplant isn't a static object. It's a complex, sensory being. It's constantly monitoring the light, the temperature, the humidity, and yeah, maybe even the vibes in the room. Caring for it isn't just a chore. It's like you're the curator of a sensory world for a living, perceptive organism.
And all this science actually gives us some really practical tips. When you rotate your plant every couple of weeks, you're not just fixing a crooked plant. You're actually responding to its phototropins, helping it manage its constant search for light so all its leaves get a chance to thrive. And when you wipe the dust off its leaves, you're not just cleaning, you are clearing the way for its photoreceptors to soak up all that light energy. It's all about understanding and responding to your plant's active sensory needs. And that really brings us to our final thought. If we've misunderstood something as common as a plant for so long, treating it as passive when it's actually this active, perceptive being in ways we're only just starting to grasp, it just makes you wonder, right? What else about our world have we completely overlooked?